And officers, I'll make that 10 o'clock, so let's get started. Thank you for attending. First item on today's agenda is to receive apologies. Do we have any?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Eyre and Anthony Dolman.
Thank you. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. The next item then is later items to be introduced by the Chair. I just have 17 today. I'm joking, of course. We don't have any today. Let's keep moving. Item number 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any? We have one here.
Yes, for item 15. Chair.
My agenda goes up to 8. Thank you. Noted then that there is an interest in the item. We are expecting to discuss the co-opted membership today. So, noted, thank you. I don't have a huge amount of faith in my agenda right now, but I'm going to keep moving. The next item I've got is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of January. We've all had a copy. Moved and seconded, thank you. Any objections? Thank you. Item number 5 on my agenda here is to...
Councillor, so there are 3 sets of minutes.
Clearly need to update my agenda, apologies. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve committee, so let's deal with them in bulk. We have the 27th of November 2024, 29th of January 2025, already moved and seconded, thank you, and the 25th of February 2025. Moved, thank you, seconded. Any objections? Thank you, okay. The next item then is to discuss the outstanding resolutions. So, thank you. Does anybody have any queries or concerns on the outstanding resolutions? That's typical. I was hoping to buy a minute to sort my agenda out, and there's no questions, no queries, no comments. Right. We'll keep moving with yours. Thank you. Okay. That takes us straight on then to item number 6, which is an update from external audit. We do have a representative. Welcome. Thank you. And if you could present, that'd be great.
Thank you and good morning. I'll keep it short and simple. There's very little update. We still have no guidance on what rebuilding assurance would look like. And that is inhibiting our ability to plan how to deliver your 24-25 audit. The system leader has moved through to MHCLG now. So we are hoping for some traction, but I will keep you posted. And that's about all I can really say at this point.
Thank you. Does anybody have any queries or observations? Yeah, please.
Is there nothing you can do on the interim, Mark, to move things forward? Because certain things will be consistent, I would think, year on year.
There's some elements we will look at doing. The real issue is the ability to get to a clean opinion, and all I can say is it's complicated. It's very complicated, and it does inform what we would do at interim and finals, and therefore we're just in a really difficult place. But we do remain committed to doing what we can do to get back to a clean opinion. We just need that bit of guidance to help us. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
So there's no indication of when this guidance will be coming or anything like that? You've not heard, or Alice has not heard anything?
No.
This really concerns me because the lack of being able to get audit resource into, I think, the whole of the public sector, but certainly local government, has been an issue. And now we've got audit resource that isn't able to operate because we haven't got the guidance. So we seem to be tying our own hands somehow into actually being able to get out of the hole we're in. Is it something that the LGA has already been acting on, or is there some more pressure that we can put in conversations that we can have to try and get the advice that we need so that everything can move forward again?
I don't think there is. The key players has moved to MHCLG now. So the words I've heard is the guidance will come soon. And I'm not sure what else you could do as an individual local authority. The key players are in this is MHCLG, the National Audit Office. The firms are involved in this as well as the regulators.
Can I just add as well, you know, the considerations to the resourcing requirements, both from the external auditors and from, you know, from internally, from our teams, in terms of what that building assurance may look like. You know, that is a significant risk in us being able to respond to, you know, multiple years of disclaimed opinions and an outstanding audit. So, you know, we just have to be mindful of our ability to be able to respond, as I said, both internally and external audit to those requirements as well. It is a big risk and a concern.
I'm just wondering, Chair, whether it's something that we should be getting our MPs to be at least cognizant about so that they might be able to make appropriate lobbying at their level.
I'm not against it if we feel like that's worthwhile. Are we in a position to prepare an update and a briefing for our MPs?
And we do have regular updates with our MPs. I think the Chief Exec has monthly ones, so I can definitely get it onto the next agenda. More than happy to do that, to raise that. But as Mark said, you know, it is at the highest level nationally anyway in terms of the discussions around this. So, but you know, more than happy to do that. Though I don't think it probably will have that much impact. But you know, can't lose anything, can we, Lucy?
Okay, if you're prepared to do that and keep it in the limelight, so to speak, it doesn't feel like there is a lot else that can be done, unless anyone has any suggestions now. So we'll take that as a course of action. At least we're not doing nothing. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments in response to external audit? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, it's not an external audit. Did I miss something? Did we discuss outstanding resolutions? Pardon?
We rattled through pretty quickly, but as there was confusion, was there a matter you wanted to raise?
I must have been looking at the past minutes at the time. There was an issue on the outstanding resolutions that relate to the incinerator at Sinfin, and I was just a bit concerned for a number of reasons that we seem to have pushed back the audit until Q3, Q4 of this year. First point being that we actually raised this in June of last year, so we're now almost a year further forward, and as a committee we had concerns about how that was taking place. Now, in between time, we've got local government reorganisation impacting on us, and this project not only is a major contract, it's a major service delivery area, not just for the city, but for the rest of the county. It also has a big impact on our debt moving forward, which is going to be another issue for local government reorganisation. And I'm just concerned that we seem to be pushing this back further and further. I do understand that there's sensitivities around where we go next with the incinerator, but I'm sure they can be managed. And I was party to this discussion that's referred to in here, and it seems there's a big jump to what we discussed at that meeting to where we're now on the latest update, which is basically some sort of internal audit with terms of reference not yet known, maybe Q3, Q4 of this year. I'm not sure that is a reflection of the discussion that we had almost a year ago.
At the moment, we are dependent on the project team. We've had meetings. We had a meeting with them. They were going to talk to the county's internal audit team as well to decide how we're going to approach this. We've heard nothing back at the moment. There's nothing for us to audit. I mean, we've spoken with the strategic director as well, and she's keen that we do some work, but not until Q2 and 3 when the key gateways are coming up. So until there's something for us to audit, I'm not going to waste resources on something where we're going to have no output from.
Thanks, Richard. Perhaps we could, similar to the last outcome, perhaps we could just send a polite nudge to move things along where possible. Councillor Wright, is that satisfied?
Yeah, I mean, I understand all the reasons given. I mean, it does relate to an item later in the agenda that talks about the constitution, our terms of reference of this committee, and some of those issues do relate to this. And one of them is having major issues referred back to this committee to actually discuss. For me, this is one of the key issues for the city over the past probably couple of years that, you know, as a committee, I think we should have been more engaged in. And I do think the executive, one of the issues in our terms of reference is having key issues referred to as an Audit and Governance Committee to refer to. And one of the key issues that we discussed 12 months ago nearly is governance of this project. It just seems to me that it feels to me as a committee we are not A, fulfilling our duties in terms of our terms of reference, but B, understanding a key risk to the council moving forward. But I mean, I will go with the rest of the committee's view on this, obviously.
The committee has been involved in it in the past, but it was 2 or 3 years ago. We did a lot of work around the governance then and did a presentation to the committee. So it's not like we haven't done any work on it. We have in the past.
Can I just come up in terms of that audit? It's not that it's being pushed back because there's no intent for audit to get involved. It's as Richard said, it's just at the right point in the process of the project where audit can add value alongside with the county, and that's what the time in Q3 reflects in that timing, Councillor Wright. It's not that there's not a will for any engagement. That's absolutely. I just need to assure committee that that's not the case.
Thank you. I wonder in this case if a little bit more information and detail around what the rationale is for the trigger points for that audit might satisfy the query. So perhaps maybe even outside of committee, just some information.
More than happy to do that. If audit want a briefing in terms of the process that's set out in terms of the gateways for the reviews, then absolutely more than happy to either arrange that for next committee or do something outside of committee if members want to do that. But I'm sure the service can give you an update. More than happy to do that.
That sounds good, thank you. Perhaps next meeting. Councillor Bolton.
Chair, I think that would be useful. We don't want to be seen to be not being open and transparent. And alternatively, obviously, the staff have got priorities and other issues to deal with. However, I think it would be useful at the right time if we are brief. Let's be honest, we're all concerned about the situation. We've got nothing to hide. So let's, at the appropriate time, and I'll be guided by the officers, let's just have an update and perhaps a briefing on it so we all understand the implications behind the situation. I think that would be probably the best way forward.
Good idea, sir.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like we're all on the same page with that. We'll receive a briefing as soon as we can at the right time. Moving back then to item 7, provided that's, yeah, okay. We're moving back to item 7 on, which is now the correct agenda, my apologies. Were there any more queries or comments for external audit? Item 6, that is, yeah. Okay, thank you. So back on track and moving on, the next item on the agenda is internal audit progress and QAIP.
Thank you, Chair. I won't spend too long on this. There's not a great update to give you between what's happened since we last reported this at the January committee and the one now. The update goes to the 28th of February. What I will say is there's 2 assignments that we've completed in there, transitioning into adulthood and equality, diversity and inclusion plan. One was reasonable, one came out substantial, and they're detailed on page 7 and 8. The key issue really from my point of view is around the recommendations and the impacts that the get together with the strategic director of place and some of her service directors had on moving forward some of the recommendations in there. And as you can probably see from the recommendation tracking, some of those have now dropped off, and so we've got less that are being thrown up as moderate risk recommendations that are over 6 months old. I'm happy-ish with progress. Again, and I seem to be saying at every meeting, we're still getting knockbacks when we're trying to do audits, and the audits are taking a lot longer. It's not just at Derby, it's across the partnership that we run, but it's also across the country as well. And a lot of my colleagues in other partnerships and other internal audit teams are saying exactly the same thing. It's much more difficult with the priorities that people have got to get audits done in the time we would like to get them done in. The only other thing I'd flag up on the progress is the fact that there is a low risk on home to school transport that's been risk accepted, and you can find that on page 24. Appendix 2 of this report is the Quality Improvement and Assurance Programme. Again, that's something we've updated to reflect the new standards that are coming in, but we've got a paper on that, so I won't go too much into that. But again, we're moving forward on that, and we will be taking on board some of the issues in the new standards, and that will be being brought into our work. That's all I really wanted to say on the progress report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Mr. Webster.
Oh, thank you. Yes, as Richard said, it's a bit concerning about the recommendations. I mean, looking through the detail of the recommendations, start on page 46, and looking at some of the comments on the right-hand side, some of them have been getting the same comment for a number of meetings. For example, the very first one there is a comment about the policy document being updated, pending review. That's the same comment we've had since July last year. There's another one on page 51, the top one, again. Some technical issues apparently, and again that's the same comment we received since July, and there are a number of other comments there that which are reporting that there's been no change. So I wonder if there's more that can be done on that. We had one meeting with the director. I wonder if there's any more that can be arranged, any further follow-up we can do or the audit can do, and also linked to that again. Richard's been telling us about K10 system, which is going to help in following up these recommendations. When there's any progress on that system?
Picking up on the K10, the rollout of that is we're rolling it out across the partnership, and that's what we've got to do it. It is taking a lot of time. It's a lot of work for those auditors that are getting involved in that. Hannah, for example, is one of them, and she's been, she's snowed under with trying to do a day job plus roll out K10 at all the partners. We're planning on rolling it out at Derby in early April. Again, that will help us because that will give all service directors direct link on to all their outstanding recommendations. They'll be able to see them there. It's not that we don't follow things up. We send out regular emails to the various people that have got outstanding recommendations. Again, we just don't get the responses back.
So I anticipate a little flurry of activity when K10 gets launched, and April, by my clock, is next week, so it's not far off. So perhaps we'll have some progress, but there is definitely a proposal coming to the committee about the restructuring of the meeting frequencies and structures, with the involvement of heads of departments in less formal one-to-one meetings, whatever we're calling them, we don't know yet. But so the meeting went well, we will be doing more. It's being structured now so that we can discuss it as a committee and vote on it as the way forward. Councillor Kerr.
Chair, I'd like these reports to get a lot shorter, and to achieve that it means that we need to get a lot of the recommendations dealt with and ticked off. So the sort of proposed way of doing things that you've just alluded to may mean that the ones that I've highlighted on my copy here of things that we've not heard anything back for 6 months and it was already overdue, maybe can wait until that process, or do you think we should be picking up some of these now? Because we know that internal audit has an important role to safeguard the organisation, and if it isn't able to do its job, then we need to be questioning its purpose. And this to me is saying that it's not getting the respect that it needs. And we've tried going to the top, and we've tried hitting at a strategic director level, which seemed to be working, and as we've seen in the report reflects, some of those things have been actioned and we've been able to get rid of them, but others are still not quite delivered. The ones that I was particularly looking at were within people services predominantly. So whether we need to do something within that, I don't know. And things like the D2N2 Children's Homes contract, this is going to get more complex, I think, with the local government reorganisation. Should we be doing something now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a temptation with government reorganisation coming to kick these things into the long grass, but I think we should resist that at all costs and do what we can now. With respect to our informal meetings with department heads, I think it's a good idea to look at people services next. And that raises the question, is bringing that for a future meeting just going to delay progress on the implementation? So perhaps we can just discuss and resolve. Does anybody have any objections to discussing and resolving that meeting frequency in this meeting now? There's been no notice, there's been nothing published, but we can discuss and agree it.
There was just one recommendation that concerned me. It was down as a moderate risk. The one on page 47 about financial checks carried out on candidates who've been access to very sensitive financial information. Given the information we have on treasury management and investment strategy coming up later on, it strikes me as being almost essential for people in certain posts to have these checks done as a matter of course, not as a matter of exception. Will it be done at all? I mean, the recruitment manager is suggesting that the decision to conduct financial checks has far-reaching implications. That's not a decision he can make. And who can make that decision and when is it made? Is it being made for specific posts within, for instance, the treasury management area? Are financial checks being carried out? They should be.
I should imagine so. Can anybody respond to that from finance or audit?
It's an issue that I've been involved with since 2009. We first highlighted issues around such things as right to work in the UK, financial checks, etc., as part of some work we were doing with Derbyshire Constabulary at the time. And we made some recommendations there, and these things are going to come in. So when we did this pre-employment checks audit again, it flagged up the fact that not all these things were happening, and there was a time when there was all the disclosure and barring service and that type of thing, but that doesn't really cover as many of the jobs as it used to back in the day. So from my understanding of it, there are very few financial checks that go on around employees that we're taking on. that are going to be working in a finance environment. But again, that's just one of the reasons why we highlighted this in the audit.
Essentially, in my view, that for certain people in certain roles, that it is carried out as a matter of course. It's not optional, it's essential. I mean, if you're talking about people in other roles, not, but, anybody who's anything to do with treasury management or investment, it's absolutely key.
Is there more we could do in this regard?
There's more what the internal audit could do, or that the City Council can do. I don't think there's much more. I mean, we keep highlighting it without sort of forcing people into which we can't do. I mean, we have had issues in the past, which I don't wish to go into, around, where pre-employment checks would have highlighted financial issues. That was some time ago, but I totally agree with what Philip is saying.
Thank you. Yeah,
I mean, I share committee's concerns around this. So if it's okay with committee, let me take this away and just pick up some of the detail and understand what some of the opportunities and obstacles are in terms of this. But I hear what you're saying and do share the same concerns. So let me take that away.
thank you. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. I'd like to raise another point as well. In terms of the audit plan, looking at the completion of the audit plan, there are still 3 audits outstanding from 23-24, although 2 of them are in draft. But for the 24-25 plan, there are currently only 6 completed, I think, if I'm reading this properly. And I wonder if that's a cause of concern for audit as well, in terms of their coverage.
Sorry, I was distracted. My apologies.
I'll say it again. I'm looking at the completion of the plan, and here we are at the middle of March, getting towards the end of March. And for the 24-25 audit plan, there are only 6 audits that are finalised. Obviously, a lot of work done on all the others, but not finalised. And I wonder if that was an issue in terms of completion of the work, and whether perhaps the plan should be revised to make sure that these are completed earlier.
I think the big question from this is, will I be in a position to provide the annual audit opinion for the June meeting based on the audit work? Yes, there are still a lot of audits outstanding. I mean, a lot of these, they've moved on in the month of March as well. We can gain a lot of assurance from the work that's already been done, and I will build that into the opinion report anyway. A lot of the work as well, because of the way we do quarterly planning, tends to be an ongoing thing. So all the stuff that was happening that's been brought forward audits is taken into consideration as well. I get assurance from other sources outside of the internal audit work as well. So all of those are factors. So if I had a worry that I couldn't produce an internal audit opinion for 24-25, I'd be raising it now with the committee, and I don't have that issue at the moment.
So you'll escalate that at a point where you do have.
As far as I'm concerned, Chair, there will be an opinion, and we'll produce that in the June meeting.
Thank you. So coming back then to the theme is moving the conversations along with the department heads. The proposal is to alter the frequency of our meetings as a committee into a quarterly meeting, of which there is a schedule which is being finalised to make sure it meets the deadlines required for reporting to other committees. That's a quarterly meeting supported by, where necessary, alternate month meetings, which are informal meetings. They're invitations to department heads to talk about and account for the actions they're responsible for. And I do think K10 will help, but I do still think there's a space for these meetings. It's a bit of a shift from our current meeting structure. Informal meeting attendance would be voluntary but recommended. It's our methodology for moving things along. But of course, quarterly meetings are constituted properly with agendas and broadcasts, etc., etc. That's the proposal. I apologise for lacking on the detail of when those meetings would be in terms of the frequency, but it's essentially a quarterly meeting constituted such as this one, supported by non-constituted coaching, supportive meetings every other month. That's the proposal. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, can I just check these informal meetings? Are they minuted or will they be reporting? Because obviously, because some of us work in the daytime, so it's not. It can be difficult to get to all of them all the time. So it's just.
Yeah, that's fair. So being non-constituted, they wouldn't be minuted as such. The result would be the updates on the reports that come back into committee. That would be the result of the meeting. And of course, not mandatory, so that's helpful. The only other point is, as not mandated, we can deploy teams and things like that to make it easier to attend. Councillor Kerr.
We already have some quite long meetings and have decided that we need, I think we had an additional meeting this year. So to reduce the number of main meetings is going to potentially mean that they become even longer if we're going to be doing the same business. And the actual role of audit and accounts, audit and governance has evolved over time. It's become a much more important committee than it used to be. So I would need a bit more persuasion to think that we can fit what we need to do into only quarterly meetings without them becoming unmanageable. And I think the lack, I think I'd like to have, to show the value, we've had one informal workshop type meeting, which appeared to be valuable, but hasn't delivered everything we hoped. And to base a significant change on one partial success, I'm not ready yet to sign up for that.
Okay, thank you. Any more thoughts? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Councillor Carr. I think it was a good idea, and the first meeting, although it wasn't totally successful, certainly enabled me to understand some of the issues in much greater depth. So it not only, it put into context some of the reasons why these were difficult to resolve, but it also encouraged the service lead to actually get the team round the table and deliver. I mean, I think a good interim solution would be to have another one of these and use people directorate because it's got the most outstanding resolutions to actually go through it. And it may be that there's not a need to do this in future, but I certainly don't think in this meeting we get enough depth and understanding to actually to make informed decisions. And the other thing is that if the one I think we've scheduled for June, this informal meeting, doesn't work, we've got the ability to have the service leads in here to ask them directly. So, you know, my proposal would be we go ahead with the one with people because that would be 2/3 of the business looked at, and then make a decision whether we need to do it on a more regular basis. I'm a little bit sceptical, like you, whether we ought to have it ongoing, but I certainly think there's a need to actually grasp the nettle at the moment and take it forward, and then make a decision after that meeting.
Some sense in that. That was absolutely at the cusp of it. Thank you for reminding me. It's about giving the business leaders, the areas, an open forum to consult with us. So they're not stood in the dock there, but they're in a friendly, open environment when they discuss these matters. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I attended the last informal meeting, and as somebody who's relatively new to this committee, I found it quite informative, and indeed I was able to get a sense of processes and some of the key issues. So I think perhaps we ought to, the next one certainly I would support, but I suppose a way forward would be a needs must perhaps, rather than having them tabled.
Good point. If there's nobody to invite in, why have the meeting? That's fair. Currently, what I'm hearing, though, is that we should test it again in June, see what we feel after June in terms of tweaking the structure of this committee frequency. Is everybody there with us, or any more comments or concerns? Councillor Kelly.
Can I also suggest that, given that I think this is the last meeting before the annual meeting, when there will be a change of membership, I don't think we, as this committee, should be imposing that change on a future committee.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for that. Yeah. So we'll carry on as planned in June with people and take the experiences of the 2 meetings already in the bank to decide after the newly formed committee what the future looks like. Are we all okay with that? Okay, thank you. I know it wasn't on the agenda, but thank you. Just before we move on then, are there any more queries or concerns with internal audit, QAIP, or are we prepared to move on? Okay, let's move on then. Item number 8, closely associated with the internal audit plan for Q1.
Thank you, Chair. As usual, we've brought to you a quarterly plan for Q1. One of the things I will say is that we've done this again in our usual way of looking at what's happening across the authority, looking at risk registers, discussing things. I discussed this extensively with both Martin and Hannah. We've come up with the plan that you can see at Appendix 1. The key thing there is we've dropped the amount of audit we plan on Place Directorate, because we have spent a lot of time in the Place Directorate over the last couple of years. So we're focusing more around the Chief Exec's Directorate and also People Services. So that's what you'll see there within there, the audits that we feel that we are key to starting in Q1. We've taken this to corporate leadership team and they've gone through it and raised questions. Alison's come back and she's happy with the content of that. We've also spoken to a lot of the service directors individually as well around what their key areas are, having any worries, any risks, etc., and built all of that into it, certainly into the indicative plan that you'll see for quarters 2 through to 4. Again, there's still some new issues that I've got to add into that for Q2 going forward that have been raised with me since then. Some of the work in there is what we call cross-cutting services, which is stuff that really, to how else I get my assurance from by looking at various things like the assurance framework, the governance framework, and other work around that, a few contingencies in there as well to help us out should we need it. But the key areas really are we would want to cover from between Q1 and Q4. We've got them all listed in there. Scheduling is important. Again, we've agreed the scheduling where we can do. So hopefully we shouldn't get knocked back on any of these. But you know, I say that, but it does change from time to time. You agree like a Q1 or a Q2 start with someone, and when it comes to it, they say, could you push it back a bit further? Or we've got this we want to implement first of all. Could you come back and have a look at it after we've implemented this? So there is still some negotiation to take place on this one. But the key thing that I want to mention is, of course, that from June, the role will be picked up by Hannah, who's here today. She will be looking after Derby City's internal audit work. So again, she's had a big input into this. What I didn't want to do is stitch her up in any way, shape or form. But that's all I really wanted to say around the plan, but I'm happy to answer any questions on it.
Thank you. It's also worth noting that there's a revised internal audit charter that we will be discussing today or passing.
Yes, the revised, I mean, it ties in with another item on here on the standards, but the charter is something that will need updating due to the new standards. So we'll continue to work on the 24-25 charter that came to this committee last March. And as it says in the report, I've updated various parts of it to reflect what else we've got to have in the charter and to take on the new standards. I then want to sit down and discuss that with the CMAP management team and then with the partnership, the operational group, which is all the key officers from each of the partners around that. But one of the things we will do is then bring it back to each individual audit committee, so it'll come back to the Audit and Governance Committee, hopefully to the June meeting for you to have a look at and sign off.
Thank you. Any queries or comments, members? Councillor Kerr.
Can I just raise an issue that I'm thinking that might be worthwhile to look at, not as a top priority, but at some point, which is the creation of new public open spaces and their transfer from developers to a long-term solution. I'm told, maybe somebody here can confirm or not, that the majority of public open space in Oakwood has not been handed over to the council, but is supposed to be. Certainly the majority of the public open space around Heatherton is due to be handed over to the council, but hasn't been. In Littleover, we have two other developments where the public open space is supposed to be being looked after long-term by a body, though not the council. And none of these seem to be going forward. And it seems to be an area where the process is currently not working. And it puts that safeguarding of public open space, which is really important to well-being of society, to Derby, in a sort of uncertain future. And I just feel that there's something there that maybe we ought to be making sure is going to work before we create yet more of these structures that aren't happening.
Thank you. I know, while not strictly related to the Q1 plan or the charter, it's an interesting point that you've raised, and I find myself wondering what it is we'd be auditing against. So maybe that's something I could ask for a comment. Richard, have you any thoughts?
It's the type of thing we would, if it's raised with us, we would put it into our audit needs assessment and have a look at it and see where it ranks with everything and what the risks are around it and where those risks sit compared to all the other stuff we look at. So, I mean, what we do is we do a whole audit risk assessment of all the activities of the council, and so it would fit into there, and it would then be looked at as part of that, and where it sits. So you could find it coming up in the indicative in the future. Again, what I'll do is Hannah and I will discuss that and see how it fits in.
Thank you. So we'll take that forward and consider it. Yeah, thank you for the. Are there any other comments or questions? So the proposal then is to consider and approve the Q1 plan and to note the new revised charter. Are we all in favour? Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda then is the Audit and Governance Committee Terms of Reference Review. Everybody's had a copy, and we will be considering them at length now if anybody wants to raise any issues. Councillor Kerr?
I'm not really clear from this as to what this mandate actually means or is. It seems to be just here as a word, and I can't see there's any structure around that word that actually does, says, requires anything in particular. So maybe a bit of discussion on that would be helpful.
It's a new area that's been put forward within the global internal audit standards, that internal audit has to show what its mandate is for doing internal audit, which is, it differs within the private sector. For the public sector, and certainly for local government, our mandate comes from the Local Government Act 1972 and the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015, where an internal audit has to be undertaken. So basically what it means is to put into the charter what our mandate is, so we just have to state the legislation that that requires internal audit to be performed.
Does that answer your question? I think my interpretation would be that the word mandate is deployed, instead of this being something which we feel like is good practice or worthwhile doing, this is something we are required to do, or a duty that's placed on us.
The proposed wording, the wording as proposed, says to approve the internal audit mandate. Well, if the internal audit mandate is a diktat from government regulation, how can we approve it? It would be to accept the internal audit mandate and to approve the charter.
Unfortunately, the problem is that these global internal audit standards have been accepted by the standard setters for the public sector as well. So, and the fact is that the standards say that the board, as they call it, which in local government will be the audit committee or whatever, deemed with the responsibility for governance, has to look at the mandate that's put in there and approve it. So we will put it into the charter, and as a committee, well, I hope we would approve the mandate as part of the charter. But unfortunately, it is in the standards, and we have to adhere to those standards. So if we don't, we're not conforming with the global internal audit standards. So it's something that's got to be put in there. It's not something we haven't had to do before. I mean, we cover it. We know why we're here, but that's what the standards say. So unfortunately, and we're required to conform to them.
Maybe this is just red tape, I'm not sure, but I think, paraphrasing then, do you voluntarily and willingly accept the thing we're requiring you mandatory to do? Yeah. That's perhaps how we should be reading it. Councillor Repton.
Yeah, Chair, these deliberations are all very important, but as we know, the clock is ticking, and whether we like it or not, within 24 months, there's likely to be wholesale major change to local government. And some of our deliberations now, I wonder, A, should we be making our own recommendations into that process? And two, are we even starting to consider talking to the likes of Erewash, Amber Valley, South Derbyshire, about major changes, whether we like it or not, are going to happen? And I think so. Some of the things that we do now are very short term. They're only for the next 24 months, probably max. So has any consideration been given to this committee about major changes, the most significant that have happened to Derby in over 50 years? And I think we ought to now be focusing on that, as well as the very short term.
It's a good point. I mean, we need some decisions to be made at a more general scale before we can involve ourselves in the detail. But it's a good point. It's worth bearing in mind these are temporary measures, potentially. They may carry on in the new world, they may not. I don't know. Who can say? But it's a good point, well made. If we do decide that we want to make any changes to this particular terms of reference, then that needs to go to full council for approval. So with that in mind, members, do you have any more queries or concerns? Dave, Mr. Webster.
Yes, thank you. Picking up on Councillor Kerr's point, the new global standards don't just say improve the charter and the mandate, they say approve the charter, the mandate and the strategy. I wonder if the word strategy could be inserted in there as well. And the second point is with regards to private meetings between Head of Internal Audit and this committee, where again the global standards say that they should take place, they should happen. Whereas our terms of reference, point 33, just say we got the opportunity for them. I wonder if that should be delete the words the opportunity for and just say free and unfettered access, including private meetings for the committee. And similarly for external audit as well, the same point. Just to, because they don't seem to happen. And the standards say they should.
What if we were to make those meetings a requirement rather than an option?
I mean, CIPFA, we base our committee terms of reference on the model that CIPFA have done. CIPFA are very keen on these meetings happening. Committee has debated over a number of years, the head of legal has been involved in this as well, about what these meetings can do and what they can't do. Like, no decisions can be made there, pretty much like the informal meetings that, around the internal audit recommendations as well. So again, it could be something that, if any decisions are needed from it, then they have to come back to this committee. But there's no reason why you can't do that. It's seen as good practice. And I know that at other places that they quite often have meetings with the internal and external auditor and the audit committee members without any officers being present. So it does happen, but again, the flavour was, does it meet with the legislation around committee meetings and that type of thing? That was what Head of Legal's opposition was to it when it was first mooted.
So this draft, is this drafted as proposed, or has it been altered between the proposal and the current state?
Which draft's that, Chair?
Where we talk about the opportunity to meet rather than an obligation to meet. Has that changed from the original draft?
This was the only. I've not changed the wording from last time, so it's always said opportunity in there.
Okay, thank you.
Just to point out, as Richard said, it's not about making decisions in these meetings. It's providing assurance for the committee from internal and external audit of the work they're doing if there are any major concerns. So it's not about making decisions.
Yeah, it's a good point, noted. But are we proposing to revise the terms of reference or just keep it in mind?
I propose to revise it.
Yeah, any proposal needs a seconder and a vote? Councillor Kerr?
On Derby Homes, this area is covered by members of the committee asking beforehand to say whether or not we want to meet with auditors effectively at the beginning of the meeting. And we could have a process that worked like that. I don't know how that would actually work in terms of wording. But if a member said, I think it's important that we talk to internal external audit on this matter, we could postpone the start of the formal meeting by a quarter of an hour and fit in a meeting prior to that.
If we were to agree to that, that would be consistent with the current wording. We'd have the opportunity to meet. So I guess that's covered. But we could talk about that structure as part of the wider conversation. Yeah. Do you want to repeat the proposal just so that everyone's clear?
Yes, the terms of reference as they stand are to provide free and unfettered access to the chair of the committee for the head of internal audit, including the opportunity for private meetings with the committee. What I'm suggesting is we delete the words the opportunity for and just say including private meetings for the committee. So that would tie in with SIPFA guidance, it would tie in with the new global internal audit standards, and the same for the external audit as well.
Okay, and just before we make a decision, does that present any operational or resource risk?
Not for internal audit, no.
So that's the proposal. Would anybody like to second the proposal? Thank you anyway. Are there any other changes proposed to this document, or are we approving it as written? Approving as written? Okay, thanks members.
So Chair, that will now need to go to full council.
So the way I'm reading that, it needs to go to full council if there's a revision, but if there's no revision, I don't think it does need to go to committee.
The revision is in paragraph point 21 to approve the internal audit mandate. And there was the suggestion that there's also, did you say strategy? And whether we actually should be referencing a strategy as well, which we then ought to be creating.
Okay, so those alterations then need to be passed if we want to pass them. Sorry, that's gone through like that. So do we actually want to make those revisions in the document? It was proposed. Is it seconded? Yeah, seconded by Mr. Webster. Are we all in favour of the proposed changes to the terms of reference? Okay, thank you. In that case, yes, it does need to go to full council for approval, and we'll make those arrangements. Thank you. Yeah,
Just to come back on what was said earlier on about local government reorganisation, I think this is absolutely critical, and what was said earlier on, I would like to reinforce my view on that thing. It is fundamental to the organisation here and to the organisation and the people that live in the area, and we need to be fully aware of the implications of this as soon as anything starts. So as soon as any proposal is ready, or anything is ready, we need to look at the whole functions of what's going on, not just here, but in any other authorities, and all the complications that will ensue about bringing all these things together. We can't do it today because today we don't know what organisations are going to be combined, if any. But it needs to be on the stocks, ready to go, as a matter of quite clear importance. And it's so fundamental to the organisation. I think I can't reinforce, in my view, that's what it is, and we need to be ready to go with it as soon as any sort of decision is made later in the year.
Yeah, agreed. Councillor Kerr.
Can I very much support that? Because I think one of the problems that we've had as full council has been the lack of involvement of non-cabinet members in the process at present. Now, we are audit and governance, and it's clearly within our remit that we should be interested in the way that the area is governed. And to actually maybe empower yourself, Chair, to go and have a conversation about how we can best be involved to add value to the process over the production of a business plan and beyond would be, I think, helpful, and to have a report back on that at the next meeting.
Yeah, don't disagree. That's a good suggestion. So, if you could record an action for me to reach out and discuss how we keep in the loop from the outset. Of course, we do need more strategic decisions to be made before we can carry anything forward. But there's nothing wrong with extending another branch. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So if that concludes that item, then we move on to item 10, which is the Treasury Management and Investment Strategy for 25-26. I believe we have a speaker.
Thank you, Chair. We've prepared a short presentation just to support this report, just cognizant that the report is quite technical and quite detailed. So hopefully that will guide you through some of the main aspects of the report to bring to committee's attention. Just while Jack's loading that up for us, just to be mindful of, we had committed to some training for committee from Marlin Close, our Treasury advisors, which we will progress. It's probably better to do that in the beginning of the new municipal year when we've got new committee, if there are any changing members associated with that. But there is a commitment to do that, and we have spoken to them about them doing that. Okay, so if you just move on to the first slide. Thanks, Jack. So the report brings to committee's attention the Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26, and that was approved by full council in February of this year. And Treasury Management is the management of cash flows and borrowing investments and the associated risks with that. And we've historically borrowed to finance capital expenditure, and therefore we're exposed to those financial risks in terms of loss of investment funds or the revenue effect of changing interest rates, and that's really what the strategy aims to do. You can see there on the slide the elements of the Treasury Management Strategy. So, just move on, Jack, please. In terms of legislation, local authorities have to have regard to the CIPFA code in setting and approving the Treasury management arrangements, and there's the expectation that we do follow that. And I think external audit would be very interested if we didn't follow the CIPFA code in relation to the Treasury management strategies. The 2021 code. The most recent code focused on some changes, and that was in terms of the approach to borrowing, and that was tightening controls in terms of borrowing in advance to make profit, and that's not permissible under the new code, and that's pretty obvious why the code was tightened to restrict local authorities taking long-term loans and committing to long-term debt with an initial expectation to make profit from investments of those loans, which is quite risky in itself. There's an element around proportionality, the risk to levels of resources, and then the need to report on investments. So that's about changing the reporting requirements to report under service investments, treasury management and commercial activity. So a little bit more scrutiny in terms of the more recent updates of the code. Next slide, please. So the guidance, there's adherence to the principle of the code should ensure that treasury management activities are effectively managed and adequately controlled. So, as I said, adherence to the code is an expectation and something that we absolutely do follow as a local authority. And the code requires us to set a framework for that reporting and decision making, which we do. We report. We have our annual report, what this is, and then we have a mid-year Treasury Management update that goes to Council, Cabinet and full Council and to Audit and Governance Committee. So we do have quite a lot of detailed reporting and exposure in terms of the Treasury Management Code. In terms of the Treasury Management Strategy, it picks up those particular four areas. Liquidity, so that's our ability to deliver short-term obligations to cash. There's the cash flow investments, and then a series around financial risks. And more importantly, the strategy sets out the limits and boundaries for those prudential indicators. So that's the framework in terms of how and when we make decisions in terms of treasury management. So for the borrowing strategy, our borrowing, we currently hold 500 and just shy of 520 million pounds worth of loans, and we have an increase in capital finance requirement due to the capital programme. And we are now in a need to borrow position, and that's predominantly as a result of the fact that our internal resources have been used for financing activity. Our borrowing increased by 263.2 million recently, and that is for not just for the current capital programme, but also, as I said, the fact that our internal resources have funded previous year's capital spend. In terms of the net revenue impact that has on our revenue budgets, we had traditionally been at around a 5% level of our borrowing, our debt charges as against our net revenue budget. That is predicted to move up to around about 8 or 9% in the medium term, and that's reflected in the medium term financial plan. I think at the moment we're around about 7%. It's still comparatively relatively low if we look at some of the local authorities' debts in terms of their borrowing, but obviously it does have an impact on the medium-term financial plan and the revenue implications of the authority. So we do absolutely scrutinise and try and reduce the borrowing impact that it has on our revenue budget. So next slide, please. So in terms of the borrowing strategy, given the significant pressures facing local authorities, the Council's borrowing strategy continues to address the key issues of affordability without compromising, and that's really important, the longer-term stability of the debt portfolio. And our approved sources of borrowing are identified on page 6 of the report. To note, though, that the effective use of internal resources or borrowing over the short term is a strategy that's been adopted by the Council to try and minimise that exposure and that risk over rising interest rates and debt portfolios increasing over the longer term. So the borrowing strategy talks about the underpinning principles around the borrowing strategy. It looks at the affordability of loans, and as I said, that's predominantly our strategy at the moment is short-term borrowing because of the high interest rates that we've seen of recent, and the fact that we don't want to tie ourselves into any high any higher risk than we need to take in terms of borrowing. We will have to do a piece of work over the medium term to look at our debt profile and any refinancing that's associated with that, and our Treasury advisors are working alongside us with that. We need to look at our maturity of the profile of existing debt, the interest rates and financing risks, our own internal cash balances, what we're going to need over the short, medium and long term, and what we can do, what our proposals are in line with those prudential indicators and our approval processes and the framework that governs those decisions. So in terms of the investment strategy, the majority of the council's surplus cash remains in short-term money markets. As detailed in the slide, the average, I think just on the next slide there, Jack, please. Yeah, the average rate of interest received on short-term investments was 4.77%, and that's got an average duration of 1 day. So what that means is that we take every opportunity we can where we've got cash balances to invest them to be able to deliver a return on those surplus cash. And some of those investments, as it says there, are for short-term and for overnight investments. There's unlikely to be scope to improve that in the short term as we're in a borrowing requirement. So we're not particularly cash rich to be able to put longer term investments to be able to deliver a larger yield on those cash balances. In terms of the investment indicators, the council, as we've set a number of quantitative indicators to allow us to assess our total risk, and they talk about our total risk exposure, investments funded by borrowing and the investment rate of return. In terms of the prudential indicators, these indicators are indicators of performance, and they're reported quarterly to Cabinet. And there are no new indicators that are proposed as part of the 25-26 Treasury Management Strategy. However, one indicator has been revised, and that's the maturity structure of borrowing, which has been updated, and that was on after feedback from this committee. I think it was Councillor Kerr who reflected some changes in that particular indicator in terms of how we report that. And that ensures reflects the council's short-term and long-term borrowing needs, and how we manage that to avoid being tied into longer-term higher interest rates. So if we just go on to the next slide, you'll see that the maturity structure of borrowing indicator has been amended, and this in effect gives an indication of the borrowing over the short to medium term to reduce the refinancing risk. The indicator highlights the existence of any large concentrates of fixed rate debt needed to be replaced at any time of uncertainty over interest rates. So it's designed to protect against excessive exposures of interest rates in any one period. So in effect, it smooths the debt out over a period. Most councils, we're quite prudent in this. Our upper limit is 50%. Most councils, when we've looked at other indicators, have an upper limit of 100% from 10 years. So our 50% is quite risk averse. If we just go on to the next slide, it will give you an indication of that spread of that maturity of borrowing. So this outlines the profiling of all our extending loans. It is quite small, but it does go up to 2021. 61, 62, so you can see some of the long-term debt, and we've got a pretty much a nice smoothing of that debt, as I said, to protect against hikes in interest rates. The 25-26 borrowing is particularly high, and that's due to the short-term loans that we've had to take out as part of our Treasury Management Strategy to avoid being tied into longer-term interest rates. So ordinarily, you'd see that peak being profiled over the longer term, but our strategy is to take short-term borrowing out at the moment while interest rates are high until we refinance that or pay that short-term loans back. Thank you. In terms of the Treasury Management Principles and Practices, that's the TMPP. That's a framework that, that outlines the policies and processes that the Council follows to manage its Treasury management functions. And the goal of that is to ensure financial sustainability, to optimise liquidity and to mitigate any risks associated with the Treasury management strategy. The next slide details the principles and practices, and I'm conscious it's quite a large document, but the Treasury Management Code requires the Council to maintain the cornerstones of effective Treasury management and investment. The policy statement states the policies and objectives and suitable Treasury management practices in which the Council will operate. In terms of the principles and practices, there are 12 Treasury management practices. They're set out in the detail of the document, and they cover risk management, performance management, decision-making analysis, improved instruments and methods of techniques, organisation, clarity, segregation and responsibilities, reporting requirements, budget accounting and audit arrangements, cash flow and cash flow management, anti-money laundering, treasury training and qualifications, use of external service providers and corporate governance. So it's quite, I appreciate it's quite a lengthy document in terms of the TMPP. So happy to take any questions as a result of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks particularly for the presentation. It's so much easier and faster to take things in that format. We are essentially being asked to note this together with one more point, but does anybody have any questions or comments?
Just a few things. Quite clearly, it's conservative with a small c policy, basically, and risk averse. Appointment to I've just queried something about appointment to advisors and things, and how often this is done, and what the options are for anybody other than Arlene Close, for anybody else. Are there any other options or not? Is it frequently done, and so on? I thought the most telling point of the whole presentation, the whole thing, was the indication about on page 29 of the report, investments funded from borrowing, actual nil, and that's the key thing. That's where local authorities have fallen very, very badly wrong in certain instances, and quite clearly we're not in that sort of position at all. And the other area I just wanted to touch on brings us back to that thing about we looked at earlier about the appointment of staff. Staff who have access to these arrangements. They're all presumably trained, they're all supervised, they're all vetted for dealing with banking, dealing, treasury management, and so on. Is that done across the board or specifically for certain people? And what restrictions are there about anybody else getting access to the system?
So in terms of our Treasury advisors, we are under a contract for that. So we do go out through procurement, through a tender process. So that is an opportunity for other advisors to come into the market as part of that. So it's not a done deal that it's always all in close. I think the current contract expires next year, so we will be going out to that process again. In terms of training and internal control, absolutely, it is. There are multitude internal controls that exist to be able to ensure that we operate effectively and safely in terms of that treasury management function. It's a small professional team that deal with that because it's quite a specialist nature, but they do have the relevant sort of qualifications and experience within that. And we do, as you probably note, as part of the audit plan that we've considered earlier on in the agenda, Treasury's management is scheduled for audit as part of the next year audit plan as well. So we do ensure that internal audit are really, really close to give us those assurance around those practices within the Treasury management activity.
Could you try to speak into the microphone? Members can't.
Sorry, sorry. Page 37 of the thing, dealing authorised officers. There are talk about borrowing activity, lending, and so on. They are post-specific rather than person-specific posts. So an individual is in that post, so it's that individual rather than, so it's the post rather than individual. Yeah.
Yeah, but we would absolutely just ensure that the right person is within that post with the relevant qualifications and experience. But yes, it just makes the document easier to keep up to date if it's the posts.
Thank you. Are there any more comments, questions? Councillor Kerr.
I'm not sure this is really most pertinent to this meeting. I think it probably is something that should have been looked at earlier. But looking at the graph giving the liability benchmark in the papers, and it was in earlier papers as well, so this is page 17. And we've clearly got a large chunk of planned expenditure in the this coming year, year after, which is taking us up into quite a different level of borrowing than we've had previously. And I presume this is something that internal audit will be partly bearing in mind as part of their audit in this area. But what worries me about this is that this is a static projection from now. But in future years, there may be further aspirations or need to put in significant expenditure on the capital nature. And this could therefore be a very different shaped curve with the future borrowing included in it as well. So I suppose it's really just a question about the long-term sustainability and whether any thought is given to the intergenerational impacts of the sort of decisions that we are making, and whether that is something that is borne in mind when Treasury advice is given.
Absolutely, it's all around affordability, and that's closely matched with the ability to be able to repay those loans, and and has been a feature within the budget planning process over a number of years, and absolutely has been this financial year. So we will always look at, for example, the capital programme and what those borrowing requirements are, and ensure that they're not excessive and aren't affordable in terms of as being able to commit the authority to to longer term debt. So yes, it is something we absolutely we do absolutely pay regard to.
Thank you. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. Excuse me. Just looking at the detail on page 159, it talks about the annual Treasury report and the quarterly reports, both produced for Cabinet. But at the bottom of both boxes, it says that the Audit and Governance Committee will also receive copies of those. Now, I don't think we have in the past. Does that mean we will in the future, or should that be there?
Yeah, you will in the future, yes. Yeah. I don't. Why have we not in the past? Okay, so this is a new. This is sort of new to this document, so yes, we will be. We've updated this document to ensure that we've got more accountability to this committee.
Okay, thank you. More work for us.
Thanks. Well done. So, members, the consideration here is to note the report, the presentation, and the contents of the appendices. And also to note that the Council delegates authority to the Section 151 officer to amend investment levels following appropriate advice from the Treasury officers, as detailed in Section 4.56. Any concerns, or I shouldn't give it, but I should be more binary. Are we all okay with that? Okay, thank you. There's a slight revision to the agenda going forward, being responsive to people's time pressures. We're now going to move to item 14, which is the Risk Management Strategy and Handbook Refresh. Just take a moment to catch up. And we have a speaker.
Actually, apologies, I think I was suggesting item 14 after item 11. I don't know whether Alison is also needed for item 11. Yeah.
Various conflicting time pressures then, is that right, Alison?
We're both at the same meeting. There's cabinet pre-agenda that starts.
Okay, we'll deal with item 11 first, which is the accounting policies. There has been a revised version emailed, I believe. Yeah. So everyone's had a copy by email, a shorter notice than usual, apologies, but does anybody have any comments on the policies?
Do you want me to,
Like to
do you want me
speak
to
on
run
the
through
matter?
it?
Please, yeah.
Yeah, so the report covers the adoption of the Council's accounting policies for 24-25 financial statements and an explanation of some of the changes that are required. The majority of the Council's accounting policies remain unchanged from the previous year. However, there are changes with respect to International Financial Reporting Standards 16 or IFRS 16, which regard to leases. A small amendment to expected credit loss model element of the accounting policies and charges to revenue for non-current assets. I'll just give you a brief summary of each change. So IFRS 16, this is a relatively new accounting standard for local authorities that has been postponed a number of times, but has now become mandatory for the 24-25 accounts. The main impact of IFRS 16 is to remove for lessees the previous distinction between finance leases and operating leases. Historically, finance leases have been accounted for as an acquisition with the asset on the balance sheet together with the liability to pay for the asset in the long-term liabilities. By contrast, operating leases have been treated as a sort of pay-as-you-go arrangement, similar to renting an item, with rentals charged to revenue in the year that they are paid, with no requirement for these to be reflected in the balance sheet. IFRS 16 requires all material leases to be accounted for using the acquisition approach, recognising the rights to use an asset and the corresponding lease liability on the balance sheet. There are two exemptions to this, which is low-value assets, which we're seeking to approve this committee to set at £10,000 in line with our capital de minimis limit. That can be found at recommendation 2.2. And also, within the leasing provisions, there is an exemption for short-term leases, that is leases that are less than 12 months from the date of transition, which is the 1st of April 2024. The expected credit loss model, the change here, this is actually a clarification rather than a change to the losses we account for on loans to business, as we weren't explicit about this in the previous accounting policies. This amendment confirms that we group businesses into categories for the assessment of impairment to loans based on the type of loan and credit risk. In practice, all our loans are actually in group 1 of the 4 groups. The other groups just allow for different bases for calculation under different scenarios. The charges to revenue for non-current assets, this just brings the annual minimum revenue policy part of the accountant's policies in line with our minimum revenue policy position, and has been updated with capital loans made on or after the 7th of May 2024 where an expected credit loss is recognised during the year. The report seeks approval of these changes together with the adoption of the other unchanged accounting policies, recommendation 2.1, and in addition we're seeking approval via recommendation 2.3 to delegate to the section 151 officer powers to make new accounting policies and amend existing accounting policies as may become necessary. For context, this is to give the ability for us to act nimbly should an emerging issue require a change to our accounting policies in order to produce the financial statements in a timely manner after this report has been approved. And that's pretty much a summary of what it is.
Thank you. So there are recommendations here are to consider and approve the accounting policies to be used in completing the 24-25 statement of accounts. Also to approve the de minimis level for low value leasing at £10,000 and that members delegate to the section 151 officer the power to make new accounting policies and amend existing policies as may become necessary in the production of the accounts and during the external audit process. Any such changes being reported back to this committee potentially after the event. Are there any comments or queries? Move for approval. Are we all in favour? Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to deal with point 14 on the agenda, which is the risk management strategy and handbook refresh.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a standard report to update the committee and seek approval of the updated risk management strategy and risk management handbook. These were last updated in 22-23 and approved by this committee in March 2023. So to make sure that both the strategy and handbook are reflective of current practices and according to the agreed review frequency of at least every 2 years, Both documents have been refreshed in line with our medium-term financial planning timescales so that we can align our position on risk appetite. The focus on the latest review has been on developing the documents to enhance our risk management culture and to further develop the tools available to support in risk review and management activity. This is building on and enhancing the progress that's been made across the risk management landscape over the last 7 years. I just want to highlight key changes. So to the risk management strategy, which is in Appendix 1, this document provides the architecture for our risk framework. The changes as outlined in paragraph 4.5 include a review of the risk management roles and responsibilities to ensure that there is clarity and make sure we've addressed any gaps. So, for example, we've included the delivery board that wasn't previously on there. We've added a roles and responsibilities RACI to further strengthen understanding, because this matrix will help to clarify roles and responsibilities of each group or individual involved in risk management activities at a glance, ensuring everyone has understanding of their part in the process. We have refreshed the risk maturity self-assessment that was undertaken in October 2024. And the risk appetite level definitions have been added to ensure there is clarity around what the organisation means of each risk appetite level. In line with this, the handbook, which is in Appendix 2, and this supports our colleagues in the practical application of our risk management. That's been strengthened in several areas as outlined in paragraph 4.6. So that includes a targeted guidance tool for reviewing risk controls, which we didn't have previously. We've added further information on the department risk registers in multiple places within the handbook. There's been a review of the risk appetite level definitions and statements following various stakeholder engagement, including with CLT and Cabinet members, and that's within the risk appetite guidance. There was an ask from this committee to strengthen the emerging risk log process, so that guidance wording has been strengthened to ensure the process is transparent. And we've added, at the request of this committee, the risk target score guidance, so that with links to risk appetite and tolerance. This is definitely a smaller review than the last one we bought. We're just building upon the good work that we've done over the last couple of years. The next formal review of this handbook and strategy will be completed in 2026-27, with any changes required in the interim communicated via our 6 monthly risk assurance updates, recognising that it's important that both the documents are dynamic and reflective of the latest circumstances, opportunities and challenges for both the Council and for the City. So the recommendations of the report are noted in paragraph 2.1 to 2.3 are to approve the updated risk handbook and strategy, and to note that a report on risk assurance will be submitted to this committee in July 2025 in line with our roles and responsibilities set out in the risk management strategy. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and thanks for presenting such an evolved and sensible, measured strategy. Refreshing to see the work on target risk and appetite. Do we have any comments or queries? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, just a comment. I think it's a really comprehensive document, and it's really reassuring that we've got that level of detail in terms of management of risk. I know we're not considering any risks at the moment, it's just the strategy and handbook, but relates to Councillor Repton's comment earlier. Have we got an emerging risk around local government reorganisation? And in particular, I'm thinking about the capital programme, that we may be investing significant amounts of money in assets that may not be required in the future because we'll share those assets, or those assets may be delivered from not within the city boundaries, wherever that may be. So is that A, is the risk identified, and B, is it actively being discussed as part of our local government reorganisation plans? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So yes, there is a risk on LGR. Because of the reporting cycle, it will be included in the Q4 performance report, which will be coming to Cabinet at some point in the future. So it is not currently, it's not come to the last one, which you'll have seen, which is Q3. But yes, it is being thought about within conversations that are happening. Thank you.
Thank you. It would be easy for us to assume that all of these observations on local government reorganisation are being captured, but I think the right thing for us to do is to make sure they are fed back to the project team as they emerge. Is that something we can do? Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I feel really grateful that I was on this committee when risk became a thing, probably about 10, 12 years ago. And I'm conscious that I think it's an area that if people are not involved in risk management in their professional working lives outside the council, many councillors will not have had embedded, particularly if they've not been in this committee. And it may be something that would be worthwhile having some councillor training on in one of our monthly training sessions, just so that people understand what people are talking about, because risk actually comes up in lots of different committees and meetings. And to actually know that it's what it is, I think could be helpful for all parts of the councillor decision-making process.
What do we think? Internally resourced training on risk management for the councillors?
We last did this in January 2024, but we'd be happy to repeat it.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Chair, if I can take you back to a previous item that was raised with respect to the pending reconfiguration of local government, 50 years on, so to speak. Will we be having that as a specific item and topic that a future committee of this nature will look at? And if so, when? Thank you.
It's in your gift to request that, Councillor, if you'd like to do so, and I'm happy to support that request. Could we make arrangements to review and consider that on a more in-depth level in a future meeting? Thank you. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. Excuse me again. I was just looking through the paper and looking at the roles and responsibilities, the RACI table on page 263, which I thought was very good, I have to say. But I wondered if it could be extended. These are the activities it describes as a sort of the low-level task activities. But could that table be extended to include things like deep dives, surgeries, the assurance policies, showing the roles of all the groups for those activities as well?
Thank you for the question. I mean, this is the first time we've added this, so this is a new item included in the document this time. This is very much an outward-facing document in terms of our internal colleagues. So we wanted it to be as far-reaching as possible. In terms of the roles and responsibilities, we do outline those elements. This is just an at-a-glance crib sheet for people having further understanding about the detail that's in the roles and responsibilities. So those things that kind of more sit with the assurance team audit, we've not included them as much to try and make this a bit of an easier to use crib sheet at this point, but we can consider it in future updates. Thank you.
Thank you. So the temptation with RACI is to document it, and jobs are good, but I urge you to consider training for the people identified or the grades identified in the RACI so that they understand where they've been named, what that means and what they need to do about it. It's just a piece of advice. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Yes, go ahead.
I think it's an excellent document. I'm really, just to be a bit picky, on page 269, your index, you seem to have suddenly crept up to 344 pages. You've added in some extra figures.
We can correct that. Thank you for pointing it out. I'm not quite sure what's happened there.
I thought 344. I haven't got that many, but I know there's a lot here. Sorry to be picky.
No, thank you. It reminds me actually of a point that I wanted to make to the committee, that any minor formatting errors, valid as they are to raise, if we could try and feed them in advance of the meetings rather than during the meetings, where possible, and if not, during the meeting is fine. Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions for risk management? Okay, so the proposal, as you heard, is to approve the updated strategy, approve the updated handbook, and to note that the report on risk assurance will be submitted to the committee in July 25 with the roles and responsibilities set out in the matrix. Moved. All in favour? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Okay, moving slightly backward on the agenda then to item 12, we have the new Global Audit Standard, a report from Internal Audit, I believe.
Before I launch into this highly anticipated, exciting report on global internal audit standards, which I really enjoyed writing, I must admit, I've got an update actually on the point that Mr. Sunderland raised about the finance checks and pre-employment checks. I've been invited to a meeting tomorrow to discuss the recommendation and what finance checks could. So whether this is just a coincidence or whether someone's been looking in and suddenly decided to react, I don't know, but I just thought I'd let the committee know I have got a meeting on this tomorrow, so things are moving on that one. To move on to item 12 and the global internal audit standards, we've mentioned this a few times as we've been going through the committee meeting this morning. One thing I will say is that I've only just got used to the public sector internal audit standards after all these years, so this is an interesting change. As I said earlier, it's a global one, and it's the Institute of Internal Auditors, the Global Institute of Internal Auditors that have done this. The standard setters for the public sector have taken on board these standards and only made, unlike last time when they produced their own public sector internal audit standards, interpretation of those internal audit standards. This time they're going more along the lines of the global internal audit standards, but having an application note that just explains the differences with local government and with the public sector and how the public sector has to interpret some of the standards slightly differently. They've also done a code of governance on internal audit, because one of the standards now comes under domain 3 is about the governance of internal audit. And so CIPFA have done a code of governance around this to help audit committees, senior management teams in local government understand their role within the governance of internal audit. One of the things that we have to do as internal audit is discuss with senior management at Derby, discuss with the Audit and Governance Committee, how they can input into the standards, how the standards affect them, etc. And also report through to you how we're conforming with those standards. As I said in the report, CIPFA don't expect us to be conformant on day one. So on the 1st of April, we're not expected to be conformant. The fact that we were conformant with the public sector internal audit standards in September 22 when we had our last external quality assessment means that we should be pretty much conformant with a lot of the standards. Yes, there's the new ones that come in, like the infamous mandate that we've mentioned a few times this morning. So there's going to be areas in there that are going to be new to us. What we need to do as CMAP is look at this and say, well, where are we not conforming now, and put a plan together as to how we are going to conform, and then keep the partnership, all the Audit and Governance Committee, all the audit committees within the partnership updated as to how we're achieving that, along with the senior management as well. So you will get an update, and how we do that, I'm not quite sure. We may put it in the progress report, we may bring a separate report. It'd probably be better to bring a separate report to you on how we are then conforming, so you can actually see how this is going on. One thing I will say, global internal audit standards, as were the previous standards, are always written for an internal audit team. It's more difficult to translate the standards into a partnership. The standards do reflect that. They do say, it's different for partnerships, and there are a lot of partnerships now and consortiums within local government, so it does impact on us. But of course, a lot of the wording in that is about a single team, which makes it a lot easier to conform. We have to think, we've now got to try and conform with 9 different authorities effectively with that. So that's a taxing thing. That will keep us busy when we're putting together the action plan. But really what this report is just to introduce you to the standards. I've attached a copy of the application note, and I've attached a copy of the code of governance as well. We will keep you up to date on that. It is very few. I was at a CIPFA meeting last week, and under half of internal audit teams are well down the route on this. They're on the road to getting there, but a lot of them are only halfway down that road. So there's a long way to go for everybody. One of the things I will point out, though, is on page 4, paragraphs 413 to 415, is the topical requirements. Now, I was saying there that the only one so far that's been produced is the cybersecurity one. After I've written this report, of course, another one's come out in draft on third-party relationships. So so there's 2 out now, although that one's out for consultation at the moment. These topical requirements what they're trying to do is to make sure that all internal audit teams work into the same standards on these specific topics. So that should be quite an interesting development going on there. But the key thing really is paragraphs 416 and 417, where I just detail CMAP's approach to how we're going to do things. And the key thing is getting this plan together about how we will conform going forward, and that's something that we will bring to you. Happy to take any questions on this if I can answer them.
Thank you. I hadn't appreciated the nuance of creating that guidance for a single team into a world where it applies to CMAP, so well done for doing that. We're essentially noting this committee, but does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Moving on then, the next item on the agenda is the feedback from the Audit and Governance Committee self-assessment exercise. Thank you to those who completed the self-assessment.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we received 9 back, although I do say in paragraph 422, 8. I must have the number blindness that time. We did receive 9 self-assessments back out of possible 13. I've gone through them all and analysed them all here. In the main, members of the committee felt that on most of the areas there's some compliance. Yes, we have a difference going across committee members. So different committee members have seen, some will say we don't think they comply, others will do. So that muddies the water somewhat. But one point that was raised is about, and that's why I want to home in on this, is the very, very last question, which is around, was the questionnaire completed, as a collaboration rather than individually. We did it individually. We've done collaboration a few years ago, and it took a long time to do. However, a lot of the members were saying, well, we can't really answer that question because we didn't do it as a collaboration. But given the results of this and how different people have interpreted the questions as well, it might well be going forward that it's best to do it as a collaboration. So rather than have it individually, committee get together, and I mean you can do this one or two ways. You could have you could say let's have a small working group on this to put together and bring something back to a full committee meeting, or have a informal meeting where all the committee get together and fill this out and then bring it back as a results for debate at the full meeting. I think the thing is, what this does show is that different people have got different ideas of the levels of conformance throughout, and I think that's the key thing. So it does skew the results somewhat, in that you think there's very few where everybody's gone, yes, we conform. Tended to be the opening 8 to 10 questions or so, where most people were saying, yeah, we're good on that. But when you get down into the nitty-gritty, that's when different people have different ideas. The other thing, of course, is around the training. And I know at a previous committee it was suggested that we went out and had a poll on what to train people on. I thought it could be, again, it's down to how many people want to respond to it. The trouble with a poll is you could have 8 different answers, so it could end up with no definitive one. So I've bitten the bullet and gone, what we'll do is we'll provide internal audit training first of all, because one of the key areas of this committee is internal audit and the work of internal audit. So I thought a training session on internal audit processes and getting an understanding, so all the committee members have got an understanding of how we do the internal audit work. What you see is our output. We talk about things, and Mr. Webster's mentioned, how can you get to an assurance when you've only completed all of these? Again, we can explain to you within that how our work goes, and highlight how we try and get around some of the difficulties as well. But again, so that's something I put in for perhaps the first quarter of the next municipal year. Again, we need to work out how we do this training. We've done it in the past with having a 9 o'clock start, 9 o'clock training till 10 o'clock, and then a meeting afterwards. Not always the best way, because sometimes the training tended to be squashed in and we had to hurry the last little bits. We've done it on separate days before. It doesn't have to be in person. We can do it via Teams or anything like that. So again, that's something, perhaps if I have a chat with Jack, and we'll come back to the committee and ask, you know, which is the best way to deliver the training to you. But again, that's all I really wanted to say around this. But the key thing here is that this needs to be reported in the committee's annual report through to full council. Where you've got to demonstrate you've done a self-assessment of your effectiveness. And as I say in the report as well, the external audit should be analysing how you operate in committee meetings. And they'll sit, we've seen it with Mark sits in on the meetings, and they'll be watching how the committee, how it works. So you'll get some idea about the effectiveness of that. I mean, you could argue that in the past we haven't had an external audit attendance, so how have they looked at the effectiveness of the audit committee? So again, that's something that you will get feedback via external audit on the performance of the committee as well. That's what I wanted to cover, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we've all had a copy of the results. There's a number of recommendations to work through. Let's start with Councillor Wright.
Yeah, thank you. On the feedback, membership and support, 6 out of the 7 areas that were asked questions on required people, you know, members said requires, I think it's so more significant improvement. So I think that's the area that I think, as Richard's highlighted, that I think everybody thinks that more training is required. Taking Councillor Kerr's point that it's probably going to be new committee members, you know, after May, that I think we ought to have something that can be provided to members as early as possible within the next year, so that the more, I mean, I certainly didn't feel prepared as I ought to have been when I first joined this committee. Just one addition, that reflecting back on the Constitution, that I think there's the terms of reference for this committee that includes the Constitution as part of it, but a whole host of other issues. I think there's probably some of those areas I think we do really well. Other areas I don't think we touch at all. So I think as part of the training, it would be useful to go through those terms of reference, so existing and new members can potentially raise some of these issues fairly early on to make sure that the committee's doing what it's being constitutionally asked to do. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and time is of the essence. The municipal years tend to fly so fast that good intent at the beginning of the year ends up not being achieved. But if we could work in the terms of reference into the training, I think that's a really good idea. Thank you. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Yes, I would welcome an induction, by all means, for members of the committee, even a refresher for those who have served on the committee on other occasions. The self-assessment questionnaire, some questions in relation to the methodology. Are they standard questions? Was there a piloting of the questionnaire? And how did you arrive at the themes that informed the questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. What we've done is we've been very, very cunning here, and we've taken the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy's their self-assessment questionnaire, their model one that they publish within the guidance for audit committees. We tried producing our own several years ago, and it got a bit too big, and there's far too many questions in there, so we thought we'd try this. I mean, there's no reason why we have to use the SIT for one going forward. If committee members said, no, we want to try something else, well, we could develop another. There are several out there. If you search on the internet, there's quite a few of the accountancy firms, for example, will provide, you know, a checklist of on effectiveness of audit committees and that type of stuff. So it depends going forward whether the committee want to continue with this version or whether they want us to look at a new version.
I'd suggest if it isn't broken, perhaps we don't alter it. The only question that's been posed there, though, with relation to the questions is, would we prefer to answer them as a committee or individually? Does anybody have a thought on that? Okay.
I think it would be more educational to look at them as a committee, because I think we would then discuss around the individual interpretation of the question and learn as part of that. And it might highlight some of the points that are we actually doing everything it says in our terms of reference.
Have you experienced this both ways? You've experienced councils that do it as a group and individually, and what's your opinion?
We've tried it both ways at Derby City, and I feel, my personal opinion is that it would be better as a group. And support what Councillor Kerr was saying there, because there's a learning curve to it as well. You understand, because people will interpret questions slightly differently as well. So you get a slightly different answer because they see the word external audit and go, no, can't conform with them. When it's talking about, is it as part of the terms of reference? So again, it's, as long as you've got someone to facilitate it, I think it would work better as a collaboration.
It sounded like a volunteer to coordinate it to me. Thank you. So if we're all in favour then of doing this as a committee, we can do that next time, unless there's any concerns. Okay. We'll do this as a group then, going forward. Other items for discussion are that there are some improvements required, and what do we want to do in terms of addressing those improvements, and how do we want to record the outcomes of those discussions? Any thoughts on that, members? Okay, so initially then I'd propose that perhaps a working party from whoever wants to join it consider the recommendations, and that there is an action list provided back to committee on the back of that meeting. Is that okay with members? We'll do that then. Thank you. Dates to be confirmed. There was one other point on here. Oh, and it's a training session, and I'd be astonished if anybody wants to decline the offer of a training session, but this is your opportunity to do so. Okay, yeah, as soon as possible after the AGM, some training then would be useful. We can do that. Do we have any volunteers to sit on a working party to consider the recommendations?
I suggest we wait until the annual general meeting, because we could have different councillors on it. So
yeah.
I don't see there's much point doing it now.
Yeah, the idea of resolving this before the AGM is a bit ambitious, isn't it? So let's put it after the AGM and bring it to the first committee meeting after the AGM. Yeah, thank you. Good point. Unless there is any more on item 13 then, we can move on. We've already discussed item 14, so we're up to item 15. Now for this item, which is to reappoint or otherwise the co-opted members of Audit and Governance Committee, we'd like to ask all of our independent co-opted members to leave the chamber. And somehow we'll tell you when you need to come back. Okay, members, so we're, the consideration now is to whether we reappoint the existing co-opted members to the committee.
Move them on block, yeah.
Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I also support that. And I also welcome the paragraphs that were included at 4.7 and 4.8 to give an idea about the individuals, so that when that goes through to full council, the other councillors who've not been on this committee will be a bit more aware of the calibre of the people we're talking about.
Yeah, I support that, yeah. Any against? Right. David and Paul. So the proposal is on block, David and Paul. Yeah, okay. Thank you. That was a fiercely intense debate and lengthy, but we would like to invite you to remain on block in the committee. And thank you for what you've done so far. The next item on the agenda then is item 16, which is the updated committee work programme for 24-25.
Thank you, Chair. The key thing for bringing this is just to show you what reports were scheduled for today and haven't appeared, and also what have been scheduled for previous meetings and still haven't appeared.
So we'll have had a copy. The recommendation is to effectively note the work programme, but are there any queries or comments? Yes, go ahead.
Just a query. Waivers, I know why we haven't done waivers for a while. I mean, whether we need to do waivers is another matter, but if we're doing waivers here, the Council Cabinet is dealing with write-offs of NNDR and compliance with contract procedure rules. Have we not got two different people doing basically the same thing? Should we not either all the Cabinet doing it or all us doing it, or one way or another?
Chair, this is a historical issue. It was once, many years ago, one of the chairs of Audit and Accounts in those days was sat at a Cabinet meeting and got concerned around the governance of waivers and said he felt it should be called in to Audit and Accounts, as it was then, for the members to have a look and just familiarise themselves with why these waivers were happening, and also just to make sure, give them assurance that officers were doing what they should be and were not just jumping on the waiver bandwagon to get stuff through without considering the proper contract procedures. And it's pretty much gone on from there. So it's something, again, it's down to the committee whether they feel they still need to get that assurance. But Mr. Sunderland's right on what he's saying. It is, it always used to be considered elsewhere as well, but that's why it comes here, just around the governance. And the reason, of course, is we've had the former head of procurement retired last summer, and the new one has come in, hasn't had the chance and the resources to catch up with everything on this one, hence why it's not come to this meeting.
Busy adopting the new standard on third-party management.
It just seems a bit odd. We've got two different people doing basically the same thing. Either we should be doing it or they should be doing it. Some decision needs to be made at some stage. It's not critical, but, I don't think waivers is the most critical. I mean, we've put it down to a bit of a fine art now. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure whether it needs to be here at all, but, that's my personal opinion. But so long as somebody's look at it.
In the absence of a compelling driver, then, let's leave the status quo, and if and when that needs to change, let's bring it back. Any more questions or comments? In that case, then, the only remaining item is to confirm the date of next meeting, which will be circulated in advance, as it's a constituted meeting, and that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your participation in this meeting and this municipal year. I think this is the last, this municipal year. Thank you very much.